Hey there, it's me, Dree. Before I begin, I want to give a content warning. In this video, I'll be sharing experiences that include emotional abuse, manipulation, substance use, and the isolation of my child. These aren't easy things for me to be talking about, but I do believe that these things matter because patterns like the ones I experienced often hide in plain sight. So, in the last chapter of my story, I told you about the moment everything shifted when I collapsed and my boyfriend stepped in to play the hero. That's where many people thought the danger had passed, as if my life was finally on the mend. But what came next was far more subtle, and in some ways, even more destructive. Because this is the part of the story where the love bombing turned into control, where I thought I was building a future with my boyfriend, but in reality, he was quietly rewriting the rules of my life, my home, and even my own relationship with my girls. What looked like stability from the outside was actually the beginning of years of isolation, exploitation, and decline. So once we had settled back into life after my 5150 hold, like I said in the last video, things had started to shift. He was becoming more stern with my oldest daughter. And also at this time, he began complaining constantly about my parents. He hated their unannounced visits and the way they would just walk into my apartment without knocking. He would say our privacy wasn't being respected. And slowly, he started to convince me that my parents were a problem. So when my lease was set to expire, and with it came a rent increase, he pushed me toward a bigger decision. He persuaded me to leave my hometown altogether, to put distance between us and my family. And because by that time I was flourishing at work and I was making good money, the decision, it felt logical, like the best choice. So we moved closer to my office and to the beach, where the girls started at a new school. And on the surface, life seemed to be getting good for me again. By this time, my girls were no longer just seeing him as someone in my life. They had started calling him Dad. And that word carried so much weight for me. It gave him a place in our home and in their hearts that was, to me, practically unquestionable. It felt like proof that we were becoming a real family, that all of the sacrifices and all of the choices we were making were worth it. But what I didn't realize was how much that title also gave him leverage, not just with me, but over the kids. Not long after we moved, he started getting more serious about his golfing. And then one day he told me very matter-of-factly and casually that if our relationship was going to deepen and get any more serious, that I would need to learn how to play golf. He said that he would teach me, but I would have to commit to a year of practicing at the range before he would allow me to even step foot on a golf course with him. So 3 nights a week, myself, my youngest daughter, we would hit the range with him, and he would teach us how to swing. And for a year, we worked hard, determined to earn our spot on the green beside him. And when we finally did, it seemed great. I remember the smell of grass under the floodlights, the weight of my club in my hands, and the way my youngest would laugh and shriek when her shots actually flew straight. I had even managed to land an eagle on one of our golf outings. And I thought it was this beautiful family bonding moment that we were creating together. Me and my daughter were proving ourselves, and we were finally being included in his golf world. But after a while, his tone, it changed. He started making snide comments, getting callous about having us join him. And then came the day he told me flat out that he wouldn't be taking us golfing anymore. He said my game wasn't improving, and if I was truly interested in golfing with him, I should invest in lessons from a professional and get better. The sting of that moment, it went deep. After a year of hard commitment, the biggest commitment I had ever made in my life besides my career, my hard work was being dismissed as worthless. My daughter, who had been so proud to be keeping up, was crushed. And in that moment, I was reduced to his cart girl. Not a partner, not a teammate. I became a spectator. The message was clear. You can be near me, but you can't be with me. And not long after that, he told me he was burning out at work. He said the hours were too long for him. He said that he needed a break. When this time came, I was making a good living, and he still wasn't contributing much to the household as it had always been. He told me that if he got fired from his job, that he could collect unemployment and use it to cover his day-to-day expenses, like cigarettes, and that I could keep carrying the family. And for whatever crazy reason, I agreed. I was so invested in him, so invested in the picture we were building, that I didn't see that moment for what it was. And so he became the girls' primary caretaker, responsible for doing the morning and afternoon school runs and making dinner. Nothing else. And while I buried myself in work, he didn't choose to pour himself into our home. Instead, he poured himself into his golf game. He said he wanted to become a professional. So 5, sometimes 6 days a week, he would golf all over the county, mostly at some of the most prestigious courses in the state. And all of it, of course, came at my expense. And as his golfing increased, so did his drinking. It simply became part of the routine. I can still remember dinners back then where his eyes were glassy, and mornings that he smelled faintly of alcohol. Nights where he would come stumbling in from the golf course. At the time, I brushed it off as part of the lifestyle, mainly because I was so busy. But the truth is, he was starting to be intoxicated more often than he was sober. And it wasn't just about golf anymore. It became all about the escape. His escape from work. His escape from responsibility. his escape from facing himself. And I was left holding everything else. By this time, I was going full force in my career. I was waking up before dawn, leaving the house before the kids even woke up for the morning. I was working long days at the office. I would come home just in time for dinner. And then after eating, I would retreat to our basement and work late into the night. I did this every single night. I became a workaholic, driven to outperform my coworkers and to maintain my high rank in the company and also the lifestyle that we were living. I told myself I was doing it for all of us, to keep us secure. But what it really did was create the perfect setup. I was absent from the home, and he was the one with my girls. And just so that I can stay transparent, during this time, I had my own vices. I became what my DUI counselor called a social sober alcoholic, drinking 1 to 2 drinks every single day, not to get drunk, but mostly to get by. On the surface, I wasn't drinking in the way that people might expect, but alcohol was still a big part of my life. And I was also smoking marijuana regularly, because these things were the way I felt I could keep up with the pace I was forcing myself into at work. Taking a few short breaks during the day to have a drink or smoke a joint became my coping skills. They were my crutches, the things that made me feel like I could keep going. And underneath all of it, I was still heavily medicated for my bipolar diagnosis. Looking back at that time, I can see that I wasn't really living in my own mind at all. I was existing in an induced state. It was a state that kept me detached, numb, and functional enough to keep working. But also, it blinded the reality that was unfolding at home in front of me. The tension between my boyfriend and my oldest daughter continued to escalate. She is physically disabled and has limited abilities, and it seemed that I was constantly stepping in, reminding him of that, telling him not to be so harsh, and that she needed to be treated with compassion. But it was like he was blind to it, or maybe he just didn't care. Then came a day. He approached me holding her iPad. He said that he had been searching her history, and he found sexually inappropriate apps and websites on her device. He told me that she was falling into darkness. And these words, looking back, I can see were his own projection. It had been 3 years since he had sworn off porn, and our own sexual intimacy at that time had dwindled to almost nothing. Our sex life, it was mostly non-existent. And yet there he was, framing my 8-year-old daughter as sexually depraved. At the time, I couldn't make any sense of it. I didn't know where the influence was coming from. She didn't have friends she hung out with outside of school. And this behavior seemed so out of place for the house that we were holding. But because I was away so much and I didn't have my own point of view, I chose to believe him. And I agreed when he said that she needed to be punished. And so that's when the isolating began. Every time her punishment would end, he would claim to find something new. More websites, more apps. It became a cycle that went on for over a year. I can still remember the sound of her door shutting at night. The silence of her room while the rest of us would sit at the table together. I thought I was teaching her lessons, but really, I was being manipulated into allowing him to erase her place in our home. And what hurt the most was how normal it began to feel. Her being absent at dinner, her being excluded from family outings. It became the new routine. And I didn't realize then how much damage was being done, mostly at her expense, but also to me as her mother. Because looking back now, I can see how layered it all was. He wasn't just isolating me from my family and my parents. He was isolating me from my own child and isolating her from our family unit. He wasn't just pursuing a hobby at the golf course. He was drowning in alcohol and indulgence while I carried every ounce of responsibility for all four of us. And I wasn't just working hard. I was absent. I was living in an induced state myself, blind to the ways he was quietly dismantling my entire family. This was the house where the cracks began to split wide open, where the illusion of love and stability gave way to control, manipulation, and loss. So in my next chapter, I'm going to take you even deeper into how that unraveling cost me not just my money, not just my career, but my health and pieces of myself that at one time I didn't think I'd ever recover and get back. So all of that will come next. And until then, I just want to say, where there is love, there is light. And I'm sending you all of mine. Until next time. We'll talk to you soon.